So this is week 5 for cultures and societies of Arab-speaking countries with safe cultural heritage groups. So last week we covered the North African countries, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. And this week we are covering other African or Arab countries, starting from the sub-Saharan Africa. So we've got the part 1, Western Sahara, and Western Sahara is a conflicted area that was eventually created by the division of the North African countries during the colonization of the French. However, until today, Western Saharans do exist, and other countries around, such as in Morocco, Mauritania, Mali, and Algeria, due to the tension that exists in that area. So it's a semi-autonomous area just under Morocco. It was Islamicized after the 8th century, just like the rest of northern Africa, and was inhabited by the Senhaja or Zenaga tribal confederation. It was a tribal area due to being a desert. So nomads were prevalent in that area. Later on, camels were introduced, and it became Arabicized by what they call the Hassani tribes that settled in that part of North Africa. So there is the Hassaniya speaking Sahrawi Moorish groups, and there are also the Berber side of Western Sahara. So you have different tribes living in that area. The modern Sahrawi are Arabs of Bani Hassan or Berber that are mixed with Arabs. So they're quite a mix between these two, and geographically it is situated, as said before, just under Morocco, bordering Algeria, Mali, Mauritania. The indigenous population of Western Sahara are usually known in Western media as Sahrawis, and they are also referred to in Morocco as Southerners. So their culture is quite concentrated on nomadic life. So when it comes to architecture, you have a lot of mud houses, tents, etc. Food, you do have couscous and meat, but also they have tea celebrations that they use for guests. And when it comes to language, we have the Hassani Arabic and the Berbers spoken in this area. When it comes to customs, it is a very patriarchal society based on tribal ties, and the gender roles are also quite interesting to notice here, as Sahrawi women have always enjoyed freedom and respect, and they are usually the ones that perform the important social roles when the men are. Two is Mauritania. So Mauritania did not exist prior to 1960, so it is a fairly newly created country with quite a strong nationalism and Arab pride. The country was created by colonial France in close alliance with the Arab Berber theocracy in the Trarza region. The name of the country is derived from the Latin Mauritania, meaning west, which corresponds to the Arab name of North Africa. Mauritania encompasses quite a large area of Africa, or Northern Africa, Western or Sub-Saharan Africa, and they are connected to other Western African countries right in the south. And as a result of ethnic clashes between pro-Arabization in the country and black Africans, the authorities have banned discussion of population issues. So there are some clashes between black Mauritanians and Mauritanians of Arabic descent. There are four languages in Mauritania. Hassaniya is a mixture of Arabic and Berber and is the language of that same as Western Saharans. There is also Pular, which is Fulani and is spoken in the Atlantic coast. There is also Sorinke. Sarakole is spoken in the borders with Mali and Senegal. And we also have Bambara, which is spoken in the southeast. French is also an official language in Mauritania and is used for more formal settings. In the past, ethnic relations were characterized by conflicts. So Mauritania, being a fairly new country with new borders, also, sorry, my cat, has also created some kind of tension between different ethnic groups in the country. So Mauritania has been drawn earlier in ethnic conflicts between the government and the Tuareg and Mara Confederation or tribes. There has been instances where Mali has taken on black Mauritanians and while Mauritania has taken on Arab Malians or Berbers from Mali, neighboring Mali. When it comes to architecture, it does not have a specific how do you say, designs really. It is a mixture of traditional French buildings with Spanish and Asian influences. Because of the fragile and sandy terrain, buildings are very low and made out of mud. Colonization and it being a fairly new country does not has created a fairly new and modern infrastructure in the country. Food has important social and psychological functions. People eat together in groups from a large bowl, and they are also known for their hospitality. Their food mostly consists of meat, millet, rice, fish, and sweet potatoes. The main meal, lunch, among Black Africans, so the main meal is lunch for Black Africans, and for the Arab Berbers in the evening. So even the traditions are quite different between the two groups. Culturally, women's importance is recognized, but men dominate in the economic sphere, political and social. We can also notice that religiousness is quite strong in Mali, and there is a strong connection to the Sunni Islam. 100% of Mauritanians are Muslims. When it comes to marriage and other gender roles, it is usually the family that arranges that. So it is quite a tribal society with deeply Islamic roots. They also have brotherhoods that are based on Sufism, that's quite prevalent in the area. And when it comes to the arts, there is very little appreciation of arts in Mauritania, and due to it being a fairly new country and also due to the Islamic traditions that exist in the country, there is also though a very strong oral traditions in Mauritania that has been passed down through the tribes for hundreds of years. Sudan. So Sudan has a long history, starting from the first known civilization, which were the Meroitic people who lived in the area between the Albara and Nile rivers from 590 before Christ. So until then, it was a polytheistic society. Later on, there was also Christianity came to the area where three Christian kingdoms, Nobatia, Makura, and Alwa, came into power in the area. Several hundred years later, in 641, the Arabs arrived, so quite early compared to North Africa. Later on, during the 1800s, Sudan became quite a strong point or Islamic dynasty. However, in the southern areas, there has always been a strong, prevalent Christian societies or communities. During the 1800s, it is interesting to see that the slave trade became a growing business in the region, and that we could also connect that later on in part 7, where Afro-Arabs still exist today in many parts of the Middle East and North Africa, especially in the Middle East, and that dates back to the slavery that was prevalent during the 1800s. So these communities still exist in some parts of the Middle East. In 1820, Egypt, at the time part of the Ottoman Empire, invaded the Sudan, so it became part of Egypt. We do know that Sudan also was connected to the Nubian kingdom during the pharaonic times. So it has quite a rich and strong history compared to the other two Western Saharan countries that we just covered. In the Middle Ages, Arabs named the area that is present-day Sudan Bilad al-Sudan, or land of the black people. So the north is primarily Arab Muslims, where the south is largely black African. So you have similar issues as Mauritania, where the north belongs to more Arab, lighter skinned people, while the south is darker African people, and that has led to some clashes and some racism in society, unfortunately. Sudan is in Africa, like we said before. It shares borders with Egypt, Libya, Chad, the Central African Republic. It has quite a central point in the area, and it has also different nature. So, for instance, in the north it's quite arid, while in the south it has lush forests. So Sudan is quite a large country, and has almost 35 million people. So it's quite a large geographical area that it covers a large geographic area with a large population. There are more than 100 different indigenous languages spoken in Sudan, and that's just amazing, including Nubian. You have a lot of dialects that are Nilotic, so ancient, and also we have Arabic, which is the official language spoken by more than half of the population. English is also quite a strong language that is used in official areas. More than 100 of Sudan's tribes coexist peacefully. Also, although there has been clashes and some conflicts between them, the political sphere is more Arabicized than other areas of society. So that's quite interesting. When it comes to urbanism, only 25% of the population live in cities or towns. So that's quite interesting to see that the large part of its people do live in urban areas, and wherever you go, depending on the tribes and the climate, the architecture differs. The day usually begins, so when it comes to food, it usually starts with tea. Breakfast is eaten in the mid to late morning, and they have a large, so some staple foods are millet, beans, and other porridges that exist. So it is quite interesting that their food does not much rely on meat. So nomads, but it depends where, because nomads in the north rely on dairy products and meat compared to those in the south. Women take care of all domestic tasks and child rearing. So the thing is with Sudan, because there are so many tribes, there are so many different customs and gender roles. But in the rural areas, it is traditional for women to work in the fields as well. However, it's quite a patriarchal society. Marriage is also traditionally arranged by the parents. Greetings and leave-taking interactions with religious overtones, because it has a strong Arabic culture. The Insha'Allah, Assalamu alaikum are quite used in day-to-day interactions, or when you speak to others. When it comes to religion, 70% of the population are Sunni Muslim, 25% follow traditional indigenous beliefs, and 5% are Christian. So that's quite interesting. And Christianity is also more common in the south than in the north. When it comes to the art, there is a national theater in Khartoum. The indigenous Sudanese literary tradition is oral, also because it's quite a tribal based society. There is much oral history in it, and stories. And amongst contemporary artists, the most popular media are printmaking, calligraphy, and photography. So that's quite interesting compared to Mauritania, that does not have much connection with the arts, and also Western Sahara, that has quite a connection with music. Part for Djibouti. So Djibouti is a country to the north of Somalia, which is also part of the Arabic countries, and it has a quite a divided population between Isa, Somalis, and the Afar. So before the colonial area, there were nomadic pastorals and traders in the area. The Afar had chiefdoms and four sultanates. So when the French arrived, about 75% of the territory was inhabited by Afar nomads. So a large control of the government is actually by the Afar. We also have the Isaac Somalis, which are about 13% of the population that also originated in Somalia. So we could say that the French did promote the Isa and the Afar in the political sphere. It was a French colony, also devised and put on the map by the colonial powers. So Djibouti is in northwest Africa on the Red Sea coast, bordered by Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. The two dominant ethnic groups, the Isa Somali and the Afar, as mentioned earlier, have opposed each other on critical occasions, but a minimal shared identity and national consciousness have emerged, especially the Arabic and the Islamic part, that has made that the country is quite unified. Djibouti is quite an arid country with little or scarce rainfall. It has a traditional mode of life that is nomadic pastoralism, and fishing in the Red Sea provides a limited source of income for the country. The population is very, very small compared to other countries. It's almost 700,000, which is quite little, and it is ethnically diverse. As you have also small other minorities such as Europeans, mainly French. You have Arabs, and you have also a sizable community of Ethiopians and refugees from Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. And more than half of the population live in Djibouti city. So that's quite interesting to see as well, that the city is a concentration of all these indigenous groups and small communities of refugees. So the Afar and the Somali-speaking groups, especially the Isa, have been rivals for power and access to resources. This tension did have some effect in the 1990s. However, there are still tensions, but it's quite a peaceful society. And Djibouti has no tradition of urban architecture. The indigenous architecture of earlier centuries is found in the capitals and sultanates of Raheita and Tajdoura, as it was sultanates before, with old mosques and town centers. So Djibouti city was designed by the French and has a quite a modern layout. When it comes to food, dairy products and meat from the herds are the traditional foods, along with grain dishes. In the city, the diet is influenced by other European foods, so that's interesting as well. When it comes to gender roles, men work largely in the civil sectors, the military, port services, etc., while women are active as lower civil servants and petty traders. So it's quite interesting that the women are also part of the economy. When it comes to marriage, there is a connection between finding a spouse and ethnic group membership. It's quite interesting to see that, as they quite inclusive when it comes to who you marry. When it comes to etiquette, Isa and Afar value the expression of personal independence and courage, but not recklessness. So they feel attached to their cultural tradition. And when it comes to religion, the dominant religion of Djiboutians and Arabs, or some of the Djiboutians Arabs, as they see themselves, is Islam. So 95% of the population are Muslim, while the rest are Christians, Catholic. We also have small communities of Ethiopians, which are connected to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Academic life is lacking, so because there are not many universities or significant intellectual scene, artists, they usually cater to foreign demands. So it's something that is mostly connected to tourism. So there is little creative written literature as well, and there are no major theaters or playwrights in Djibouti, unfortunately. So part 5, Somalia. So Somalia, the origin of the Somali people is quite uncertain. Current theories suggest that the Somali people originated in southern Ethiopia, and did migrate down to the area around the first millennium before Christ. We do know that the Horn of Africa has quite a geopolitical importance and also historical importance, as it is assumed that it was the point where modern humans exited from Africa. So the Somalis are quite known for their beauty. Many are actually into the modeling world, especially women. And by the 10th century, much like other parts of Africa, 8th, 10th, or even earlier, such as Sudan, the area became Islamicized, and Arab trading posts thrived in the southern Somalia. Europeans became interested in Somalia during the 19th century, beginning with its exploration by British adventurer Sir Richard Burton in 1854. So the French claimed the far western coast, so now Djibouti. That is why Djibouti is actually part of the ancient Somalia, including Mogadishu, and also the Italians took on Somaliland in the north. Later on, there was also a trial for independence, and at the beginning of World War II, the Italians drove the British from northern Somalia, and the British recaptured Somalia and drove the Italians in 1941. So by 1949, the United Nations General Assembly awarded Italian administrative control over southern Somalia for about 10-year period. So Somalia has been colonized by two different colonial powers before, and therefore you will find that Italian, for instance, is spoken by many Somalis today. So Somalia was known to the ancient Egyptians as the land of punt. They valued its trees, which produced the aromatic gum resins and other herbs that they took on from that area. Somalia is on the outer edge of the Somali Peninsula, and also called the Horn of Africa, just under Djibouti. It is quite a semi-arid plain and does not have much rain or vegetation. The port city of Mogadishu in northwestern Somalia is the largest city and the traditional capital of Somalia. It has been destroyed in the 1990s due to civil unrest. However, it is thriving today. It is actually Somalia is one of the poorest countries in Africa. That's quite interesting to note. And there has been much international relief into the area due to conflicts, drought, etc. No census was taken in Somalia until 1975, so there is little known about the general population. However, it is estimated that the population is between 9 million and 14 million. There was a large outflow of refugees from Somalia during the 1990s due to civil unrest, and you will find there are actually many Somali communities in Europe today and the US. All Somalis speak Somali, the official language, which is an Afro-Asiatic family of languages. It is interesting that Somalia is seen as part of the Arab cluster of countries. However, there is not much about the Arabic language except when it comes to the Islamic teaching. So they are taught the language of the Quran, and it is spoken and read, however, for religious purposes and not official. A small percentage of Somalis also speak Italian, and a growing numbers speak English. You also have some young Somalis that speak several languages. Some 95% of the people of Somalia are ethnic Somalis, and relations with a small percentage of Arabs, Indians, Pakistanis, Asians, and Europeans is quite good. Nomadic. So when it comes to architecture, you have Italian and French architecture in Mogadishu, and other parts it is a nomadic herd society. So you will probably think about huts and tents that are used in the more rural areas, and while city dwellers do live in more like Arab and international style houses. When it comes to food, you have milk from camels, goats, and cows. That is the major staple of Somalis, and also meat. Gender roles: women have quite strong foot in society due to the conflicts. So while many Somali men were killed during the previous conflicts and civil wars, that has made that many women has taken on businesses and are quite the, they have quite a central importance in many societies. Um, it is also known that Somalis do practice FGM and still do until today. When it comes to etiquette, Somali language is or Somalis are very open and inviting to foreigners, and they also greet one another informally and hug. So they're quite physical when they meet you. It's quite a Somalis are quite simple but very warm people. When it comes to religion, Sunni Islam, of course, is the major religion of the Shafi'ite rite. Somalia has long been known as well as a nation of poets and a people of few possessions and no written language until the 1970s. So that's quite interesting. Comoros. So the islands were actually colonized by Africans in the 8th century, and later on the presence of Islam is recorded as early as the 11th century, so a bit later on. With the arrival of Muslim Arabs, chieftains evolved into sultanates in the 15th century, and the unity later on happened during the French colonization later on in the 1800s. So the official languages today are French, Arabic, and Comorian, and reflects the cultural diversity on the islands. So unlike the Mayotte, which is a bit more French or remain French, it is more independent and is part of the Arabic countries today. So Comorian residents call their country Maziwa, the islands, or refer to the individual name of each island. And the Comoro comes from the word Qamar, which means the moon or whiteness. So although Comorians practice Sunni Islam from the Shafi'ite rite, like the Somalians, the social organization is matrilineal, just from the African ancestry that was before Islam. It is a federal Islamic republic and is a group of 3 volcanic islands. The population of the 3 islands is estimated at around 600,000. It's a bit like Djibouti, and a number that has actually doubled since then. So we could assume that it is more than 1 million right now. The Comorian is a Bantu language that looks like, but is not related to Swahili. And each island has its own way of speaking it. So the language contains many words also of French and Arabic origin. All Comorians receive a Quranic education. It's quite interesting that just like in Somalia, Arabic is more connected to religiousness than the official language, as the second official language is actually French, or the formal education language is French. Family ties have a very important role in Comorian society, and as mentioned before, it is matrilineal. So the ancestry is related or connected to the mother's side of the family. Comorians live in villages and cities, some of which are fortified. You have many mosques, palaces, and public squares. Houses are made of dark basalt plastered with coral lime, cob, which is a mud mixed with straw from rice plants, and braided coconut fronds. So it's quite a tropical environment with diverse type of architecture. Rice is the staple food of the daily diet, along with manioc and other root vegetables, plantains, fresh and dried fish. So the food also has actually taboos, and that's quite interesting to mention it here. So ceremonial dishes include beef and castrated goat served with white rice, and traditional dishes also gruel and porridge. Men work to provide for the household and meet the needs of the family, while women band together and use their power to influence village affairs through their association. And despite the practice of polygamy, for instance, and men's near monopoly of religious offices, women have a comfortable social status as they are actually owners of the conjugal house. On average, men and women marry 2 to 4 times, but sometimes much more often. Very few men are polygamous, and even then, there is not more than 2 wives. So the great wedding is actually held by both the village and the families, and the residency, as mentioned before, is matrilocal. It is prevalently Sunni Muslim with the Shafi'ite rite, as mentioned earlier. They do have also a strong belief in jinns and other African ancient animalistic beliefs. Customary celebrations are occasions for male and female dancing, so they do have dancing as one of their arts, and also musical events are also practiced. So number 7, common cultural linguistic aspects of the country. So these countries are part of Africa, and also they have Arabic and Islamic heritage, were colonized by both the French, the English, and the Italians. I have also mentioned in the PDF a bit about Afro-Arabs and their unity and their place in the Arab world. So do read that on, and hopefully you have enjoyed this week. And on to next week, where we'll be covering the rest of the Middle East.